Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Imagine, as you sleep peacefully in your bed, your body rests, but your soul drifts through the mist, entering a house you've never seen before. Yet somehow it feels so familiar. And there, something is waiting for you. This is not an ordinary dream. It's a gate. Before we begin this story, let's take a moment to write salawat upon the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, in the comment section below. May this simple act bear witness and become our intercession on the Day of Judgment. And don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel, because even the smallest support helps spread Islamic teachings and could become a source of ongoing reward, amal yariyah, that never ceases. Evening winds softly swept over the wild grass growing along the narrow path leading to an old house left by Sari's grandfather. The house had stood abandoned for over 20 years. Its walls were weathered and rotting, and most of the roof tiles had collapsed. Yet for Sari, the inheritance was the only piece of family legacy left since she became an orphan. Sari was a 23-year-old woman. Her long hair was always tied in a ponytail. She had just graduated from college with a degree in architecture, and had always dreamed of renovating her grandfather's house to live in and turn into her own design studio. With her friend Wina, she decided to stay there temporarily to plan the renovation. Getting to the house wasn't easy. It stood in the middle of a small forest at the edge of the village, down a dirt road filled with potholes and thick bushes. But when they arrived, fear slowly gave way to awe. Despite its age, the house still stood strong, with a structure of a grand colonial-style home and a balcony that faced the east. "This place has an aura," Wina said as she looked around. Sari gave a faint smile. "That's why I didn't sell it. There's something that makes me feel like I need to be here." The first night passed quietly, but around 2 in the morning, Sari was awakened by a soft knocking sound from the front door. She thought it might be Wina coming to her room, but when she checked, Wina was still sound asleep in the room next door. Sari stood frozen in front of the door, listening closely. The knocking came again. Rhythmic, as if someone knew exactly how to wake someone, without frightening them. Holding her breath, she peeked through the window's curtain. But there was no one there. Just the empty yard outside, draped in a thin veil of mist. The next morning, she told Wina about the strange knocking. Her friend just laughed. Probably a big rat or some branch hitting the door. Sari tried to agree, but her gut told her otherwise. Something wasn't right. On the second day, they began cleaning the inside of the house. Many old items were still stored away. Dusty books, antique photo frames, even a large painting hanging in the living room. It was a portrait of an elderly man with sharp eyes and a thin, unsettling smile. At the bottom corner it read, "Radin Kartaderja, 1921. Is that your grandfather?" Wina asked. "I don't know," Sari replied, staring at the face in the painting. "I've never seen a photo of him. Nothing was ever left behind." The day turned to dusk, and the last rays of sunlight slipped behind the trees. As they closed the windows, footsteps echoed from the attic above. Heavy, slow, creaking over the old wooden floorboards. Wina looked at Sari, this time without laughing. "Did you hear that?" Sari nodded slowly. They decided to go upstairs together, bringing a flashlight and a small knife, just in case. But when they opened the attic door, all they found was a pile of old boxes and a slightly open window. The night breeze flowed in, carrying the scent of aged wood, and the distinct aroma of burning incense. Sari approached an old wooden chest in the corner. She slowly opened it and found an aged journal inside. The cover was thick leather, and the first page read, "Notes from the journey between dream and reality." Sari's hands trembled. She felt as though she was opening a long-buried chapter of the past. But the night wasn't over yet. As they descended back to the main floor, every light they had turned on suddenly went out at once. Darkness engulfed the entire house. Sari groped the wall, searching for the light switch, but none of the lights came back on. Wina turned on her phone flashlight, and its beam immediately reflected off the old painting in the living room. Something was off. The face in the portrait had changed. The man's smile was wider, and his eyes seemed to follow the light. Neither of them said a word. They simply looked at each other, eyes filled with unease. Sari clutched the old journal they had found in the attic. For some reason, even though the air felt heavy and frightening, she felt an overwhelming urge to read what was inside. They returned to their room, the only light coming from Wyna's phone. Sitting on the floor, they opened the first few pages. The handwriting inside was neat, old-fashioned, like it had been written with a feathered quill. Amid the faded sentences, one part instantly caught their attention. If you read this after the sun has set, be warned. Your dreams will no longer be mere illusions. They will seek to merge with the waking world. Wyna frowned. What does that mean? Is this just some creepy old prank? But before Sari could answer, a gust of wind blew through the bedroom window, the same window they were sure they had locked. The curtain fluttered gently. At the same time, the room's light suddenly turned on, but only for a second, then went dark again. Suddenly, Sari's body went limp. Her vision blurred. She felt herself being pulled into fog far from the room. Wyna's voice echoed faintly in the distance, calling her name, but it grew weaker and then vanished. Everything turned black. When Sari opened her eyes, she was somewhere else. In the middle of a forest, shrouded in thick mist. The sky was a deep blood-red hue, and the trees towered around her, pitch black like scorched wood. But what made her breath catch in her throat was the house. Her grandfather's old house was still there, standing in front of her, but it looked different, bigger, darker, its roof sharper, and the windows stared like empty eyes. She tried to walk, but the ground beneath her felt like mud, pulling at her steps. From somewhere in the distance, a small bell rang, 3 soft chimes. And from within the fog, a figure appeared. Woman, wearing a long white cloth. Her hair covered her face. Sari froze. The woman slowly moved closer. Her voice was like a whisper through leaves. You opened it. You read it. You've called us back. Sari screamed and tried to run, but her body wouldn't move. The closer the woman came, the colder the air grew. But just before the figure could touch her, a loud voice rang out behind Sari, a scream that yanked her back into the real world. Her eyes shot open. She was back in the room. Wyna stood over her, crying and shaking. You were out for almost half an hour. I kept calling you, but your eyes were shut tight. And your breathing, it was so heavy, Sari. Sari slowly sat up, her clothes drenched in cold sweat. She looked around. The old journal was still there, lying beside her. I was somewhere else, she whispered. I had a dream. But it wasn't just a dream, Wyn. I was there. I walked on the ground, I felt the air, I heard the voices. It was real. Wyna took a deep breath. Maybe you're exhausted. We should rest. But just as they were about to clean up the bed, one of the journal's pages came loose and fluttered to the floor. On it, there was a map, a sketch of the house surrounded by strange symbols. In tiny, faded writing it read, "The gate opens only when the living and the dreaming meet at midnight." Sari bit her lip. She knew. This was only the beginning. Night crept in once more. Wyna was fast asleep on her mattress, while Sari sat by the window, staring out at the yard wrapped in a thin blanket of mist. In her hands were the old journal and the loose map page from earlier. She tried matching the map to the layout of the inherited house. Everything aligned. Except for one mark. At the far end of the backyard, there was a circular symbol, like a sun with rays. On the map, it was labeled simply, "The Meeting Point." There were no other notes. Just a small scrawl beneath the symbol that read, "Beneath the ground the first door will open. Do not come alone." Sari stared at the shadowy backyard. The porch light hadn't worked since the power flickered earlier that night. But her curiosity now outweighed her fear. She gently shook Wyna awake. "Wyn, I need your help. Now." Still half asleep, Wyna blinked in confusion. But one look at Sari's face, serious and filled with unease, was enough to get her moving. She stood up, grabbed her jacket, and followed without question. Together, they made their way to the back of the house. The sky was overcast. Even the moonlight was swallowed by thick clouds. At the edge of the yard, hidden beneath overgrown brush, they found something. A wooden board, half buried under dirt and moss. Sari brushed the soil away with her bare hands. Beneath it, they uncovered an old wooden hatch, a door leading underground. "This house has a basement," Wina whispered. "I didn't know either," Sari murmured. With a deep breath, they pulled it open together. The rusty hinges groaned loudly. From the darkness below, a wave of cold air rushed up to greet them. A narrow wooden staircase led down steeply into the blackness. Their phone flashlights were the only source of light. The stairs went deeper than they expected. When they finally reached the bottom, they found themselves in a damp, dark chamber. The walls were made of raw brick, wet, mossy, and ancient. In the center of the room stood a round stone table. On it sat a candle, recently used, and an oval mirror framed in pitch-black metal. The air was heavier down there. "Answer." Pressing. Sari stepped closer to the table and touched the mirror's frame. The moment her skin met the cold metal, the mirror began to glow faintly from within. A vision formed, but not a reflection. It wasn't them. It was another world. They saw the house again. But it was darker, drenched in fog, just like in Sari's dream. And standing in front of it was the same woman. Long hair, white cloth, face hidden. She looked directly at them. Her voice seeped through the air, a whisper that crossed dimensions. "The veil is thinning. The first door is open. You are only one step away." The light from the mirror vanished. Darkness returned. Sari staggered backward, her breathing quick and shallow. But before she could speak, Wina pointed to the far wall. Something was hanging there. Another painting. But this time, it wasn't of the old man. It was of herself. Wina, standing in the exact same pose she was in now. Same expression. Same clothes. She froze. What does it mean?" Sari tried to calm her. But deep inside she already knew. This wasn't just some haunting or ghostly disturbance. This was a game. A game between dream and reality. Between the living and those waiting to be awakened. And they had just made the first move. Since that night, everything in the house began to change. Footsteps echoed almost every night. Whispers, soft and unintelligible, seeped through the walls, and the mirrors inside the house sometimes reflected things that weren't in the room. Sari began losing sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she was pulled back into that same world. A world where the fog grew thicker with each night, and the mysterious woman came closer and closer. She documented everything in a small notebook. Each dream felt like a continuation of the last, unfolding like an ongoing story. And every time she woke up, something had changed in the real world. Dirty shoes, wet soil on the bedroom floor, even small bloodstains on the side of her bed. Wina was growing more terrified by the day. She wanted to leave. "Sar, this isn't healthy. This house. It's pulling you in. Every night you go there, but you don't come back fully." But Sari stood firm. Something inside her knew she had to see it through. She felt chosen. She felt called. The breaking point came one night when she woke up and saw the backyard covered in small fires, burning blue from the ground. They weren't ordinary flames. Inside them, human silhouettes moved slowly, dancing in silence. Sari stood on the balcony, her body trembling. And then the voice returned, soft, almost like a song. "Your time has come. Our world needs no more dreams. Only bodies. Only doors. And you are the bridge." The next morning, Wina had packed her things. "I'm going home. I'm going to tell the villagers. We need help." Sari didn't respond. Her eyes were hollow, her skin pale, like something had drained the life from her. But as Wina stepped outside the house, she stopped in her tracks. At the wooden gate stood an old man dressed in traditional Javanese clothing. His gaze was sharp, piercing. He held a wooden staff, carved with the shape of a serpent at its tip. Without saying a word, the man stepped into the yard and walked directly towards Sari, who was still standing in the doorway. "You've opened the gate," the man said coldly. Sari nodded slowly, unable to speak. "My name is Mbasuto. I've been the guardian of this land for many years. But since this house was left empty, no one has kept watch over the boundary between dreams and the waking world. And now those who have long slept want to return." Mbasuto then asked them to follow him deep into the forest, to a place called Sendong Mayat, the Spring of the Dead. He said the final key was hidden there. And if it wasn't sealed again soon, every soul trapped in dreams would be free to enter this world, through anyone weak or open enough to receive them. The journey wasn't easy. The path was slick, tangled with massive tree roots and thorny bushes. But in the middle of the silent forest, they finally reached a small lake, its water black and glossy like glass. Mbasuto stood at the edge of the lake and drove his staff into the ground. He began chanting softly, then took a small cloth pouch from his pocket and sprinkled ashes into the water. The surface of the lake rippled violently. From within, an old iron chest slowly rose to the surface and floated. "Inside it is an ancient pact," Mbasuto said. "If opened, all who sleep may cross over. But if sealed again, the price won't be easy." Sari stepped forward, and for the first time she spoke, with a voice that wasn't hers. Deeper, firmer, stronger. "I know who I am, and I know why they're calling me." The words that flowed from Sari's lips sounded foreign, unfamiliar, almost as if spoken by someone else. Waina stared at her, eyes wide in shock, while Mbasuto immediately drove his staff deeper into the earth. He knew. Her consciousness was starting to shift. "What they planted in your dreams has begun to grow inside your body," Mbasuto muttered under his breath. The iron chest now floated calmly on the surface of the spring. Though no one touched it, its lid began to creak open, releasing a thin mist and the scent of damp earth mixed with burning incense. Inside the chest lay a strange object. Not gold, not a relic, but a small jet-black skull, with a hairline crack on its right temple. Sari stepped closer, her hand reaching out without hesitation. But before her fingers could touch it, a soft laugh echoed from within the trees. A woman's laughter, then a baby's cry, followed by the snarling of some unknown creature. "Don't touch it," Mbasuto shouted, but it was too late. The moment Sari's fingers grazed the skull, the world seemed to flip. The sky turned a deep blood red. The trees withered in an instant. The spring's water began to churn into a vortex, swallowing the chest and pulling Sari in with it. Her body floated, then sank, disappearing into a depth where no light could reach. Waina screamed in panic. "Sari!" But Mbasuto stood still, sorrow clouding his face. She was chosen since birth. Her bloodline is tied to the gate. The water calmed. No more vortex, no more chest. Only a faint mist remained, and the lingering scent of incense in the air. Waina fell to her knees, overcome with tears. But before she could gather herself, a shadow emerged from behind the trees, tall, thin, with no face to speak of. It hissed, then vanished like smoke blown away by the wind. Mbasuto helped Waina to her feet. "Go home. This is not your time to interfere. But remember, if the mirror glows again on the 7th night, it means Sari hasn't come back alone." 7 nights passed. Waina dared not return to the old house. She stayed at her aunt's home in the neighboring village. But guilt and fear gnawed at her every night. On the 7th night, as rain poured and wind howled, she dreamed. In the dream, Sari stood in the center of the old house's living room. Her hair was soaked, her face pale, and in her hands, she held the same oval mirror they had seen in the basement. Sari looked at her with hollow eyes. "I'm still here. But not everything that came with me stays quiet." Waina woke up gasping for breath, cold sweat soaking her clothes. And as she turned toward the table beside her bed, she froze. The mirror was there. Not cracked, not dusty, just faintly glowing in the darkness of the room, as if waiting to be touched. Asked ChatGPT. The mirror looked unchanged, oval in shape, framed in pitch black, and its surface was spotless, as if someone had just cleaned it. Wina approached slowly, her breath heavy. She knew this object wasn't supposed to be here. She had left it in the basement of the old house, and now, somehow, it was on the table in her own room. She tried not to panic. Grabbing her phone, she attempted to call Mbasuto. But before she could press a single button, the screen flickered, then went completely black. Wina stood frozen. Then footsteps, outside her room. Low, heavy, dragging. She turned toward the door, inching closer. But before she could reach for the handle, the footsteps stopped, right in front of the door. There was silence, and then a heavy breathing sound, just behind the wood. Wina stepped back, clutching a small kitchen knife she had kept ever since the incident at the old house. But nothing came in. No one burst through. Only a voice, a whisper, but not human, deeper, denser, as if coming from behind the wall of reality itself. It's been opened, she saw, and now we follow. The room lights flickered. Wind blew though no windows were open. The mirror on the table began to vibrate gently, and from within it, a faint figure emerged, a girl standing in the mist. Her face was blurry, but Wina knew 'twas Sorry. But behind Sorry stood something else. Taller, darker. Its eyes glowed red, and its arms were long and skeletal, like bones stripped of flesh. The figure gently placed a hand on Sorry's shoulder, and Sorry began to turn, staring straight at Wina from within the mirror. I can't get out by myself, Win. Sorry's hand reached toward the mirror's surface from the inside. But just then another hand, darker, scaly, grabbed her wrist and yanked her back. Sorry screamed. The mirror shattered instantly, and the room went black. Wina collapsed to the floor, sobbing. She knew this wasn't just a dream or a vision. Sorry was truly trapped. And she wasn't alone in there. The next day, Wina returned to the ancestral house with Mbasuto. There was no more hesitation. She had to end this. In her hands, the broken mirror wrapped in a white cloth. Around her neck, a small teakwood pendant, protection from the dream shadows, gifted by Mbasuto. As they entered the house, everything felt different. It was quieter than ever. The air inside felt hollow. No chirping crickets, no ticking clock. Even their footsteps were nearly soundless. They made their way to the basement. The wooden door that had once been hidden beneath the ground now stood wide open, with the stairs below veiled in a thin mist. Down there, the stone room looked just as it had before. The round stone table, the ancient paintings. And now, the large mirror on the wall glowed softly. But this time, there were two mirrors. The second mirror was much taller. Its frame was deep crimson red, and from within it came the sounds of crying children, a woman's laughter, footsteps, and endless whispers. Mbasuto stood before both mirrors. This one, he said, pointing to the tall mirror, is the full gate, the place where all spirits from the dream realm wait for a body to enter the real world. Wina stared at him, her eyes full of tears. And Sorry, is she in there? Mbasuto nodded slowly. But not everything that goes in comes back whole. Asked ChatGPT. Wina stood right in front of the tall mirror. Its voice sounded like a living tunnel. Every whisper that came from it sent a chill deep into her skin. The once thin fog had thickened, and behind the mirror, human silhouettes began to appear, crowding, pushing against each other, as if trying to escape. Sorry emerged among them. Her face was pale, hair disheveled, and her eyes looked as though she was both awake and asleep at the same time. Behind her, the same tall shadow loomed, its hand gripping Sorry's shoulder, preventing her from stepping forward. Wina stepped closer and unwrapped the small mirror she had brought from home. She placed it on the stone table, facing directly toward the large mirror. The small mirror immediately lit up, even though there was no other light in the room. I know this will open the way, Waina whispered. Basuto began to chant a prayer in soft, ancient Javanese. His voice a hum from a forgotten past. The air in the room grew heavier, and the sound from the mirror grew louder. The spirits behind the glass began to scream, refusing to be imprisoned again. The large mirror started to tremble. Its surface rippled like liquid mercury. Sari raised her hand, trying to touch the now transparent surface. But the shadow behind her lifted both its arms, forming a gesture like binding her. Suddenly, other hands emerged from the mirror. Hundreds, thin, long, and swift. They reached out, trying to grab Waina's body. But the teakwood amulet hanging from her neck shone brightly. The hands recoiled instantly, hissing loudly like flesh burning. Sari screamed. Her body jolted, and the binding grip of the shadow loosened. Basuto shouted to Waina. Now, call her by her birth name. Waina screamed. Sari Wulandari. Wake up. Come home. Her voice echoed through the chamber. The small mirror on the table exploded into shards of light. At that exact moment, the large mirror cracked from edge to edge. The shadow screamed, a deafening sound, and was pulled back into the darkness. Sari was flung out, her body thrown to the floor. Her eyes opened, her breath rapid and broken. She grabbed Waina's hand, tightly, and cried. The room began to shake. Stones fell from the ceiling one by one. Basuto grabbed both girls and led them up the stairs. As soon as they reached the top and slammed the basement door shut, the sound stopped. The wind outside blew like normal. Trees swayed gently. The house was finally silent. 2 weeks passed. The inherited house had now been vacated. The basement door was sealed with iron and marked with protective symbols. Sari and Waina stayed temporarily at Basuto's home, undergoing recovery. But that night before going to bed, Sari opened the old journal she had once found. She flipped through the last pages. On the very back, there was a new handwritten note. Dreams never die. They just move places to wait. And doors can always be opened again. Sari closed the book slowly. And outside the window beyond the night's mist, the shadow still stood, waiting far from the light, but never truly gone. Ask ChatGPT. Several months had passed. The old house was now just a memory, left in silence, guarded by an invisible boundary that must never be crossed again. But for Sari and Waina, their experience was more than just a paranormal disturbance. It was a reminder that this world does not stand alone. Between sleep and wakefulness, between reality and dreams, there lies a space that defies logic. Sari now spent more of her time turning inward, seeking spiritual calm. She began to explore the meaning of dreams, not from books, but from the sacred verses that served as guiding light. In Surah Al-Araf, verse 27, it is written, O children of Adam, let not Satan tempt you as he removed your parents from paradise, stripping them of their clothing to expose their nakedness. Truly, he and his tribe see you from where you cannot see them. Quran, Surah Al-Araf, 27. That verse felt like a mirror to the events they had gone through. The world of jinn, the world of dreams, and the world of humans all have their boundaries. But when humans become negligent, reckless, or dare to touch what was never theirs, the unseen can slip through. Not all that is invisible is dead. Some of them are merely waiting for an opening, and for a weakened soul. The wisdom from this story is clear. Never underestimate the power of the unseen, not merely because of fear or strangeness, but because we believe this world was created with divine rules. Rules that may be hidden from the eye, but are clearly ordained by the Creator. And most importantly, never abandon prayer and spiritual protection, because even in sleep, we can be tempted, and even in dreams, we can be tested. Sari had seen it for herself, that between dreams and reality, between light and darkness, there is a thin line, a line that can only be guarded by the light of faith. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. May every mystery revealed remind us that the world is far more than what the eyes can see. Never forget to protect yourself with zikr, bedtime prayers, and by continuously sending salawat upon the Prophet Muhammad. Peace and blessings be upon him. If this story made you reflect or feel a deeper connection, help us share its message by liking, commenting, and subscribing, so meaningful stories like this can continue to be told and become a shared source of sadaqah yariyah. See you in the next story. Wassalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.